The landscape of security has become ever more challenging in today's world of exponentially increasing information, BYOD, cyberspace, talent mobility, and facilities being located around the globe. The way organizations and people work today is dramatically changing, and the risks continue to escalate. As threats continue to evolve and workers and customers adapt to new technologies, tech consumption, shifting work locations, the need for collaborative business security has never been greater. We must move from having a short-term focus to having a long-term vision and strategy. What new ways of working can industry and workplaces collaboratively explore to address business threats and security risks in order to prevent key incidents and achieve more sustainable outcomes? Join us for today's program.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Felix Nader, and I am the president and owner of Nader Associates, a security consulting firm that happens to specialize in workplace violence. And today we have an auspicious panel of security experts and emergency management experts. To my right, we have Mr. Michael Sprayberry, who is the North Carolina Director of Emergency Management. And to my immediate left, we have Mr. Robert Martin, who is the president of the Information Systems Security Association. And to his left, we have Mr. Matt Cordell of Ward & Smith, an attorney who specializes in employer law issues and employment issues. So why are we gathered here today? We're gathered here today because the gentleman on this panel has some information that's vitally important that needs to be conveyed to our community. In watching exactly what Mr. Sprayberry has been doing over the last several years, I've been quite impressed at the array of engagement and involvement he has in our community in the area of state plans and coordinating with our counties and cities. It's a magnificent opportunity, if you haven't visited his website, to get a little gander of how busy this gentleman has to be 24 hours of the day. Chuck is not able to be here with us today, the Chief Information Officer at Duke. He was slated to be here, but Mr. Robert Martin plays a significant role in information system security in terms of being able to forecast, plan, and project how the technology community will deal with a varied array of technologies that employees have at their disposal these days. And of course, Matt Cordell will be very helpful in helping us understand what our limitations are and why sometimes we get wrapped around the axle in not being creative and innovative and in not consulting our attorneys. So with that, I'll begin to my right. When we speak of adaptive business security, our tendency tends to be narrow scope, but from a security standpoint, how do you see your office in particular being an assister to the subordinate counties and subordinate organizations, and even to the local communities of business and marketplaces in the wake of an emergency?
Well, of course, private sector is very important for our success during any type of disaster event. One of the things that I want to have happen when we have an event and our private sector partners have damages is it's our goal to get those partners back up and operational as quickly as possible, because that means that's the less government has to do. Absolutely. Because people are back to work, children are back at school, things like that. So we work very closely with our private sector partners. We have a business emergency operations center within the state emergency operations center, and we have assigned seats that are primarily for business associations. We also have close relationships with all different kinds of associations, such as the North Carolina Local Government Information System Association, otherwise known as NICOGISA.
Yes,
and we have built what we call the information technology and GIS strike teams to help counties whenever they're having issues during a disaster like a hurricane. Most people forget that most of North Carolina is still rural, and they don't have a lot of the people that some of the bigger counties like the Wakes and the Mecklenburgs and the Forsyths have. So we can actually deploy partners through these associations to help out at the local level. Our bread and butter are actually the folks at the local level, and our motto in North Carolina Emergency Management is, what have you done for the counties today? Absolutely. I ask all my folks, every day, what have you done? So I will tell you on the 24th of September, my agency is going to be having a continuity of operations exercise where we're going to move lock, stock, and barrel the operation from our current location to our alternate emergency operations center.
Very good, very good. And how does what you do tie in terms of communicating the emergency threat to, say, businesses and the marketplace? Is there a point of coordination or point of contact that your office typically coordinates with?
We have a 24-hour operations center that's open all year long, and so one of my greatest fears, and that's our point of contact, and I would tell you, Felix, that one of my greatest fears as the state emergency response team leader is if we were undergoing some sort of natural disaster event and then some bad actors, if you will, hacked into our crisis management software system and began to, decrement it in such a fashion that you weren't really sure that if maybe you were overloading your system or, you just didn't know. I mean, so, it'd be like a double whammy for us. And so that's one of my greatest fears. And so to that effect, we have partnered with the North Carolina National Guard to build a cyber response team, and we have folks that have great skill sets. They can go into a state agency and do pen tests and things like that. And so we actually have mobilized those response teams. Hasn't been an emergency. It's just because they've been. You probably heard that we've had state agencies have gotten tapped into,
yes, we have.
And so they've helped out like that. And so the way that I look at it, if we had an Armageddon-like situation where, who knows, the Chinese just overwhelmingly tried to degrade our systems, I believe the governor, as a commander-in-chief, could declare a state of emergency. And I mean, all the legal ramifications that have to be worked out. But if private sector, or if a business needed help, I believe we could get them that help. That's more for the legal guys to determine, though.
Thank you very much. Let me segue over to Mr. Martin. In terms of the organization and the role that you play in the community, from an IT security disaster and from an internet disruption, how do you see your organization as a player in preparing the workplaces through your membership?
That's a really great question. So to dovetail on what you said, it's really about awareness. So the Information Systems Security Association, our membership is comprised of about 400 individuals here in North Carolina that work for various companies, from Cisco to, I will make mention, Chuck Kessler is a board member for our group. So our role is awareness. So I believe any plan that you have, if you fail to plan, then you'll plan to fail. So we would like to be the educational arm and help. Our group is made up of military and non-military, of state and local government, federal government, as well as private citizens that are information security folks that need that information. IT budgets, as we hear, are getting more and more constrained. So our goal with our conference and our monthly meetings is to bring in the latest technologies, those solutions, not just particular nodes, if you will, but solutions that our partners, our members, and businesses can use to help defend against these bad actors, if you will.
Excellent, very good. Matt, in terms of what role technology plays in our workplaces, we know already the significant impact of the BOD, bring your own device to work, and a new terminology called the COIT, the consumerization of information technology. From a legal perspective, how do you help the organizations, the businesses, even the state agencies, effectively manage those systems in order not to avoid legal implications?
Sure. There are a host of privacy laws applicable to employers, to consumer information, that all organizations have to comply with. If they're regulated in particular industries, they may have heightened levels of scrutiny, but there's a baseline of privacy regulation. And when I speak about privacy, I'm talking about the intentional use, collection, use, and sharing of information. The other side of that coin is information security. And when I talk about information security, I'm talking about the unintentional release of information that is otherwise non-public. One of the most difficult conversations that I have to have with clients is talking about the inevitability of a breach. We like to pretend sometimes that we are infallible and that we can craft systems that will prevent a loss of proprietary data, consumer data, employee data, or financial fraud.
And then you have the human element.
That's right. That's the weakness. As long as there are humans involved in the process, there will be weaknesses. A lot of the data breaches that I've seen have not involved the stereotypical nefarious bad actor in a black hat, the stereotypical Russian teenager, for example. Instead, it involves an employee who took a device home and had a car stolen, quit the job and didn't come back to work and wouldn't return the item. It's the basic human elements. And then there are laws that require certain responses to different types of breach.
Absolutely.
And we have to advise clients that you can't wait until the crisis happens to prepare for that response. You plan ahead, and then when the crisis happens, everybody's ready, and we say go.
So
These guys sound like emergency managers.
already, don't they? I mean, we're learning. It's rubbing
right.
off on us.
In some ways, I feel like I am an emergency manager because it is an emergency for the client, and
Yes.
there's a risk of liability and compliance and fines, and we are trying to mitigate those losses.
Well, I'm going to continue with Matt. Jump in. So, from a regional security standpoint, how do you advise the client on what the limitations are, what the challenges are, and how to manage those challenges and limitations?
Where do I begin?
It's a tough question.
If I could, I could say something that we're really focused on. Several members of our group, we want to go out into our communities. We want to visit with our legal arm. We want to visit with our state and local agencies, and we love to do training. You know, IT folks are not typically the introverts that we're kind of labeled as. Some of us are, but a few extroverts out there. But education could be the key. And I, you know, something really great about our conversation when we came in here is when I talked about us meeting monthly, you weren't aware of that, and I took that to heart because we need to get that awareness out there. We need to get in with our brothers and sisters, if you will, in information security and say, come, be educated, feel welcome at our group, come in and have those meaningful conversations because we're very blessed to be able to sit in front of world-renowned IT security experts and get that advice, and we need to be able to disseminate that.
Absolutely. And to your point, the sophistication or the level of sophistication is only tempered by how competent the workforce is in recognizing the threats and minimizing the risk. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. And that education piece is so important. It's about being informed, and if there is an emergency, if that individual is properly trained and they realize that they should not stick that laptop in the back of the seat where they can do a smash and grab that. We have many companies, private and public sector. They do several smash and grabs. They'll break that window. They'll grab that laptop. Sometimes they're not well informed enough to make sure that equipment is encrypted, and then it becomes a liability at that point. And you know far more about that than I could ever dream.
Training is critically important.
Yes.
It's important because it helps prevent loss. But from a purely legal standpoint, it's also helpful because it helps mitigate loss.
Absolutely.
You can demonstrate a record of enacting commercially reasonable security procedures. Then, in the aftermath of a breach, when you're dealing with claims, that's a strong defense that can be offered up. And so you want to have not only good training, but good documentation of your training.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the biggest challenges I find in my specialty is that the HR folks, they don't want to bring in the security people and the facility directors and managers to help them understand the lingo, help them understand what they can say and they can't say. So that's a very good point. From a business consumer perspective, how do you temper the legal implications of what advice and services you offer to a client's desires to generate revenue, make purchases, and have employees become their marketeers?
Sure. There's always tension between the law and business reality. So I think there are two answers to that question. One is, a lot of times executives are overwhelmed with the risk, and they look to their lawyer and to their IT staff to say, where do I start? How do I prioritize? That is a conversation I typically like to defer to the technical experts. But my piece of that is to give the following advice. Prioritize the crown jewels of the company. What is the most important asset of this company? Is it your customers' information? Is it the relationships with the customers? Is it your bank account? And start there. What can't you live without? And then we'll deal with the rest later.
Okay.
The law allows for prioritization of resources. That's why we talk about commercially reasonable security procedures in the law.
Sure.
The other piece to that is going back to the privacy side. Everybody is excited about big data and the potential use of big data. We haven't even begun to dream of the uses and the ways that big data can be monetized. The problem is that the law doesn't quite allow for you to collect all types of data from all kinds of people without first telling them how you're collecting it, why you're collecting it, and what you're going to use it for.
Sure.
So there's got to be a lot of planning, a lot of legal planning on the front end before you collect that data. I hate to see it when clients have invested in collecting large amounts of data only to find out they can't use it in the way they'd hoped to.
Matt, that's a profound statement. I'm an instructor at night, do technical courses, and for the past year, my mantra has been working with a lot of military that are making that transition into IT. Mm-hmm. And I tell them that they certainly have a leg up because they certainly understand data classification. You can't protect all that data. It should be classified. You should have your crown jewels in a locked down, secure place with plenty of solutions around them to protect them. So that's good, very good.
Absolutely. Well, we've been talking a lot about technology, Mr. Sprayberry. Let me come back to you, and of course we can jump in, Matt and Robert. From a risk mitigation perspective and from identification of a threat, your office must be terribly busy.
It is, and they were just talking about data. We have an incredible amount of data that we store because we're responsible for flood mapping in the state of North Carolina as well as geodetic survey. So when you hear about a border dispute between North Carolina and South Carolina, we're the ones that are dealing with it, and we do all the county borders. So we work hard to make sure that our data is secure, and matter of fact, we have, like I mentioned, the National Guard team. They're coming in to work with us to do a pen test and ensure that we're as good as we can be, because again, our crisis management software system, you'll find that IT is integrated in like water systems. If the IT goes down, you're having a bad day in a water system.
Absolutely,
and so
absolutely.
Any kind of system anymore, and so it wasn't like that in the old days, so I'm concerned about our critical infrastructure and key resources and how IT integrates with it. And then if the IT sector goes down, then it has cascading effects on all the other pieces of critical infrastructure. We also have we're working on a multitude of projects, a school safety project, which allows first responders to take a password and go inside and see the digital floor plan of all 2,700 schools in the state.
That's an excellent idea.
So that'll help if there's a hazardous material event, an active shooter event, and the dispatcher can tell, the first responders, say, okay, room 426, and you can see on the floor map the ingress and egress, how to get there, all the shutoffs and things like that. And so, that's an emergency management. I will tell you also that part of the things we do is we do precision farming. So we receive fees from farmers who have onboard computers, and based on satellite data that we're feeding them, it'll tell the tractor where to plow the furrow, how many seeds to put into the furrow, and how much fertilizer to put on it to achieve maximum yield. That's an emergency management.
That's
And
incredible.
so we have a lot of data that we manage. We have a lot. We're doing dam safety plans, and no, I'm not cursing. We're doing child care center plans for like nurseries and things like that. Licensed care facility. Automated plans, and all this is web-based, right? Mm-hmm. So again, IT. So my IT department, we only have 200 people in the agency. Our IT is about 60.
Yeah, I would say so.
And so, and that includes engineers and GIS, things like that.
Excellent. For all of us, let's weigh in on this. So from a security director, security manager, dealing with the CEO and the C-suite, how do we maximize our value? How do we convey the importance of our services to this individual who is not security oriented and get buy-in and commitment?
I would say, first of all, we wouldn't have IT security if we didn't have business. So to make that business case, a lot of times IT folks, now I'll certainly be guilty of throwing a lot of acronyms out there, using a lot of technical terms. Mm-hmm. But those technical terms need to be turned into business cases. Absolutely. So anything that we do, anything that we purchase, anything we're going to implement, profound statement about industrial control systems. We have 15,000 water utilities that are out there that need upgrades, that need technology. But it's the business that drives that. And to your point, having those conversations. Now, something I will mention is there should be more conversation between our business folks, our legal counsel, and the IT departments to have that synergy. Too many times we've been sitting polar opposite on in our business worlds. We need to come together and meet quarterly as much as we can to have those business conversations.
Absolutely, absolutely. I
would echo that. The issue is the same with legal issues. Executives need to know what should be the priority and why. They don't need a brain dump. They need a list. These are the top three things. Let's start here.
That's right.
From a legal standpoint, from a security standpoint, it's always the same. Prioritize.
And don't make it complicated, right?
Yes.
This integration and collaboration of resources should be organizational wide. You know, there shouldn't be a get smart bubble where the CEO speaks CEO stuff and the security guy speaks security and all the other folks speak their own lingo. It should be the organization from the top down helping the lowest employee understand the value that we bring from a security standpoint and from a business security standpoint. Would you all agree?
I would. You made a great statement. Who's responsible for IT security? When we do training, that's the first question we ask. Right. We all are. Even to the employee who takes care of even the janitorial staff that comes in to clean the building. They have accessibility to pretty much everything. So there should be some education there. To our ambassadors that are greeting people as they come into our businesses, they should be educated. The folks entering inside of that business, and from an emergency management perspective, that's a profound statement.
I think so many times people get complacent about security, and they, you know, I've asked my guys recently, so how safe do we feel that we are? Oh, we're good to go. And so, you know, no, let's schedule the pen test. And I also, you know, I'm interested in, you know, what kind of data can we move to the cloud and how secure is that, and, you know, and how cost efficient it is and things like that. So I think you always need to be pushing your IT guys to make sure that you're getting more and more secure.
That's right. And talking to the team.
I think other factors that feed into the complacency are assumptions that our third-party vendors and suppliers will take care of things on their end, and that if things go wrong, we can simply look to them for indemnification or to make things right. I will tell you that most of those contracts are not rock solid, and a lot of those vendors and suppliers don't have the deep pockets it takes to deal with a breach. And so there's a misperception about where the responsibility lies.
You said a key word, assumption.
Assumption.
That's right.
And you know what it does, right? It spells.
Yes, sir, I know.
Absolutely. So we must avoid assumptions. So from a standpoint of integration and collaboration, I have a slide that I usually throw out to security directors when I ask the question. It's a trick question. I say, guys, let me ask, if you wanted to buy $1 million system, and the system was designed to help you identify who was coming in and to evaluate in an emergency who was in the building, and then to have data collection purposes that are legal over the next 30 or 60 days, how would you get that $1 million? And you can see there in the headline looks. And I would say, here's how you do it. Since all of you have relationships with all these people in the organization, why don't you sell them on the individual value of the respective functional departments? And then instead of it being $1 million, it's now $100,000 per department.
It's a great business case.
It's a great business case. And no longer is it just a security functionally aligned requirement or expectation, but it's a universal application.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So with that, I throw this question out to us. How do we get the physical security folks to appreciate the IT security folks and then have that dialogue, like I heard you say, because someone sent me a copy of a tweet and told me to pay attention to you, so I went to one of your talks, and you said, you know what the problem is, ladies and gentlemen, is the security folks talk security. They don't talk plain language. So how do we communicate in an organization plain language talk?
Well, I'd say the first thing, to get us around the table, to sit down and see what our individual needs are, and to also have those conversations where we can now translate what's important to the physical security folks, what is important to the IT security folks, and we'll find that those are the same. We just need to, again, speak the same language and have those meaningful conversations, and as many as it takes to get us on the same page.
Absolutely.
Because it runs on the IT backbone.
It's old-fashioned, but it works.
Yes, sir.
It really
Absolutely.
Matt?
We have a rule around my office that when we talk to clients, we don't trot out the Latin jargon, the legal jargon.
Absolutely,
We leave
yeah.
it at home, right?
Legal.
Put it in plain English.
Absolutely.
When I talk to IT folks, I enforce a rule on them. Don't use the acronyms. Explain it the first time, then use the acronym, but don't assume that I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's good.
I had a good lesson taught to me. I was a expert witness for the Postal Service after retiring on one of my cases, and the judge interrupted the plaintiff attorney and said, "Inspector, I don't want to hear any more best practices from other people that I've heard to justify their justification. Tell me in English what you did." So I love the speaking of English. I love reducing it to the lowest level. I think it's important because the guy on the bottom or that gal on the bottom is going to become our worst witness on the stand when something goes wrong, and they ask him or her, did they know? Did they understand? Humana, I didn't understand. So
That's right.
excellent point. We also have to factor in that this gentleman on our right, probably from a standpoint of an emergency planner, will have a greater influence in our organizations. I would hope that in our organizations we have people that can almost align themselves with the North Carolina emergency management function, so that you at least understand that when there's an emergency crisis, who is going to speak the lingo and who is responsible for speaking that lingo.
Absolutely. That's profound. So just listening to you talk was, I appreciate that. First of all, your presence, your experience, something that IT folks have been in the business for many, many years, the past 30 years, but you have a top-down look at the holistic view of security. And I think, again, back to the conversations, is having those meaningful conversations with your IT folks, taking their information, turning that into English, and having that single point to go out and get that information out to folks in plain, simple language that they can understand.
Right.
And this is key because not all organizations or security departments managed by security personnel. Sometimes you have facility directors. Sometimes you have human resource directors or vice presidents. And so the lingo has to be so common that even a layperson can understand. It's been a great opportunity to get with us and get some expertise around a table that can help the community realize that it's a team effort, it's a collaborative effort, and those of us should have the wherewithal to be able to pick up the phone and not make dumb decisions. And avoid that word called assumption, because you know what it does, ladies and gentlemen. So in order for us to be able to take the witness stand and raise our right hands and say, we did the most honorable and ethical thing, do the right thing all the time. Thank you very much, Mr. Sprayberry. It's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you, Mr. Martin.
My pleasure. Yes,
Fantastic.
sir.
And of course, it's always nice having the attorney. I can't tell you how many wonderful stories I have working for my criminal days. Thank you very much. That concludes our session. We hope you've at least taken away one gold nugget, and if that gold nugget saves you the anguish in the future, then we've done our jobs. Thank you very much.